boys and girls, dogs and cats, children, as well as babies. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Driveline Academy Podcast. I'm your host, Deven Morgan, with my NPR voice, director of youth baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy, and thank you for joining us on the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I am not joined, as per usual, by my brother, my partner, my co-host, Driveline Academy Assistant Director, Driveline Academy International Man of Mystery, Jeremy Techteal. Jeremy's coming back from PTO, landed at like 3 o'clock in the morning, so I wasn't going to make him come in to record the pod today. So you just got me. We haven't done one of these fireside chats in a while, so we're just going to see how this goes, but I've got some stuff for us to talk about today. But the first thing we have to talk about is housekeeping, as per usual. We'll start as usual. First-time listeners, last-time listeners know that we're going to start with the axbat.com promo. axbat.com code DL20 will get you 20% off at good friends at axbat.com for training bats and game bats. And like, those are the things that you need right now, right? Spring is upon us. We're getting ready to go into games. So whether you're like, hey, I need to work on getting some bat speed. Well, like, hey, you can find our power trader there over at Axbat. Or if you want to get a new game bat, because whether that's a U-Trip or a USA bat or a BB Core bat or some type of stick and ball sport product, you can find it at axbat.com. Code DL20 will get you 20% off. And I guess the only other thing that I should like promo in our housekeeping is the new shirts. I don't know how I can like effectively show you my back, but we finally launched some Academy specific apparel. Perhaps you could even call it the podcast apparel that I've been threatening for probably a couple years. So we've got 3 designs that just launched, 3 different tees, 3 different designs, all of whom are kind of like an homage to a very specific aspect of our culture and the things that we value and the things that are important to us. So we've got the Warriors tee, the one that I'm wearing right now. Obviously, if you see the back design with the wings and the skull with the Driveline logo on it, so please don't sue us. It's an homage to the movie called The Warriors. Anybody that's my age probably knows that movie. If you're a young buck, I would suggest, if you want a little peek into the minds of, I don't know, like 70s blaxploitation adjacent cinema, and also certainly like understood kind of the way that New York was thought about at that period of time, it would be a really good watch. But yeah, the design is awesome. I'm just going to pat myself on the back. I'm very happy with the Warriors when it came out, and shout out to my brother Isaac, who sent me a card from New York with the Warriors logo on it a couple years ago, with inspired this design. So we got that one out there. We have the Casey Weathers tee. Again, first time, long time listeners know how often we talk about the impact that I think Weathers has made on the culture that we want to create within the Academy, specifically through the lens of the video that you can find on YouTube, the Casey Weathers story, How Good Am I? You find that on the Driveline YouTube, and if you haven't seen that, you should just like hit pause on this, open up another tab, another app, and then go spend that 6 life-changing minutes that you will find watching that video. So what we did with the Let It Rip tee is basically took the last kind of big declaratory statement that Casey makes in that video. The hard work gives you honesty piece, put that on the back, and then a big skater font overlay, Let It Rip. Shout out to Jamie Kruger, who used to be a Driveline athlete and then a trainer for the Academy, for one of my most favorite cues of all time that he used to say to my kid, be loose, be free, and let it rip. So we got that one. And then we have the Shark Smell Blood one. So it's obviously inspired a little bit by the poster of a movie that rhymes with flaws or claws that happens to revolve around a dangerous aquatic animal. Adjusted enough so that it's not the copyrighted poster image. So again, you can't sue me because it's not that. We just kind of took it and modified it a little bit. And, that one, man, I think it's just all about like the approach to competition, right? And, certainly, we advocate for skill development, right? We take this very specific posture about the way that we want to apply context to game results in youth baseball. However, if we get an opportunity to go win a ball game, we want to aggressively pursue that opportunity. And that's what the Shark Smell Blood tee is all about. It actually came from an on-field thing that I said to one of our teams a few years ago. We were in the club championships, the finals, down there in Portland, and I got a chance to just talk to the kids for, I don't know, 25 seconds before the game because I had something I wanted to say. And again, this is the group that Jeremy's still coaching now. It's a group that we've had the longest in the academy, so it's a bunch of kids that I think, look, man, I love all of them, but these ones are real close to my heart, and they had an opportunity to like go out and try to pursue something really great. And what I told them, and I don't even know where this came from because it's not like I'd watched Jaws recently, is just, it's like, look, man, you guys are right at the doorstep, right? We're in the final. We got an opportunity to try to go get it. So how are we going to approach that opportunity? And the thing that I said to a bunch of, I guess, 13-year-olds, were they 14 at that time? No, they were 14, right? Yeah, 14, I think. What do sharks do when they smell blood in the water? They hunt. So you're here now. Go hunt the opportunity that you want. And we played a really, really great game. It was a really close game. Some wonderful moments by a bunch of our kids in there. We kind of ran out of pitching, and we ended up losing that game. And there were some tears shed on that field that day by not only the kids, but also Jeremy and myself. Man, it was a real special moment, even though we lost. It was a really special moment, and one of our kids that again has been with us for a while ended up taking the loss and not being able to kind of hold it in that game. And I told him afterwards, I was like, look, man, I know that you're really disappointed about the result, and it wasn't the one that you wanted, but because I know you did everything in your power to try to go get the result you wanted, man, look, I wouldn't trade you for any of these kids on that other team. I wouldn't trade you. I wouldn't trade a single one of these other kids. And I guess that's kind of the back half of like the shark smell blood thing, right? Is that like we are going to kind of try to go out and whittle ball game aggressively the way that we want to, through the lens that we want, right? We're not going to like try to minimize our opportunity for failure. We are going to try to maximize our opportunity to go out and compete our asses off. So anyways, long story short, we made a t-shirt kind of about that idea. So you can find our socials on Driveline Youth, which again, you should definitely follow if you can, if you want to support the initiative. That's just a simple thing that you do. It helps us out. The more that we get likes and comments and retweets and reposts and all the type of activity on the stuff that we post, it just kind of, it helps. It just helps, man. It gets out in the algorithm because it goes, oh, people are paying attention to this stuff. This stuff resonates. So if you can do anything, definitely like and follow on the socials, reposts, wonderful. And then again, specific to the tees, if you want to support that thing, we got some merch for you now that you can like actually represent this, whatever this thing is that the Driveline Academy stands for, from my heart and my brain to a shirt that you can wear. That's a thing that we've got right now with those 3 t-shirts. And if you want to get a piece of that, man, you want to represent what this stuff stands for, that's a great way that you can do it. Even if you're not in the Academy program, we've put them out privately to our families already, and they like it, and the kids like it. Which is a nice endorsement, right? As like a part-time graphic designer, if I put something together as also a 47-year-old man, and like kids think it's cool, like I'm not immune to the fact that like I like that, I like to know that resonates for the marketplace, and if you like them too, man, check them out. Okay, housekeeping fini. So I think there's just 2 things that I wanted to kind of walk through today, and one of the things I wanted to get, I think, more specific than we have been in the past about what this idea that I've been advocating for and using my platform for pretty aggressively about universal pitch counts and universal reporting. I wanted to just take some time to explain what that actually means, what we're kind of proposing in terms of structure and system and how we see that playing out. Because last week, on Thursday, I had the opportunity to present that same idea at Major League Baseball headquarters. So huge shout outs of appreciation to John D'Angelo at Major League Baseball for kind of coordinating that opportunity for myself, Rob Haney, and Taylor McCullough, who are all, guys that I feel very fortunate to be able to work alongside in this initiative. I feel very privileged to be able to be in that room, and I am highly appreciative of specifically what Rob and Taylor have done as heads of the ABCA Youth Baseball Committee and Travel Baseball Committee, respectively, to kind of put our group in that position. So quick recap, and I think this is important to kind of understand the amount of work that went into this. So Rob Haney in 2022 set up the annual Youth Baseball Summit. So at ABCA, we had the Youth Baseball Committee, we had the Travel Baseball Committee. I'm a member of the Youth Baseball Committee. I guess I'm not a member of the Travel Baseball Committee, but like those two committees work so hand in hand that, I've had an opportunity to work with and get to know both Robbie and Taylor over the last several years. And Rob put together the summit. He decided that we needed to have some youth baseball specific conversations and to have that not kind of get lost at ABCA, because for anybody that hasn't attended, ABCA is pretty nuts in the best possible way, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of just stuff, right? And we wanted a specific space and time to be able to talk, and not only just talk about youth baseball issues and network with people who want to push the game forward and want to see it improve, but also let's talk about action, right? We know that there's stuff that we would like to see changed about the environment and the structure and the systems of youth baseball. Well, what does it look like if we get a bunch of men and women in the room who are actual decision makers and have leverage and have positions of authority to then advocate that for that stuff based on the plan that we kind of agree upon, right? So Rob Haney started that in 2022 out of his own pocket, which, man, I don't know. I've said on multiple occasions, like, I want to be like Rob when I grow up, and I, again, as a nearly 15-year-old man, I'm being a little bit facetious about this growing up thing, but I just do want to be clear about the amount of esteem that I have for Rob specifically, because to have a guy like that who's on the ABCA board, who is the chair of an ABCA committee, and isn't just using that as an opportunity to like meet once a year, let's have a meeting, let's get some drinks, and then just vanish off into the winds. It's not that. Rob saw that there was an opportunity to like actually take action and start to push some of the big levers about what's going on in youth baseball. And again, man, I can't even hardly express my admiration, my appreciation for Rob and Taylor for what they've done there. So started the Youth Summit in 2022, been doing that for 3 years. And I've been afforded an opportunity in the summits to kind of a couple times talk about the 10,000 foot view about what I see in youth baseball. And certainly the most pressing and prevalent of those issues largely revolves around the safety stuff, right? Like that's where we're running into problems. And I think a lot of those problems, because there's safety and health issues, roll downhill to other problems that we see in our game about engagement, about retention, right? Like a lot of this kind of just starts with health and safety. So this last year for the summit in 2024, we went down to Augusta. And by that point, I had been kind of marinating on this idea of like speed limits. And we've talked about it here, right? We've talked about it here on the pod about how do we install speed limits in youth baseball to kind of control for coaching behavior. What does that look like? And we've talked through all the different ways you could approach solving that problem. Like, is it a coach education problem? Is it a parent education problem? And I would submit that that's not what it is. If simply educating coaches was the issue, then hell, man, you could probably look at what's already out in the marketplace and assume that some of that stuff would have had enough leverage to, quote unquote, this is me, for anybody that's just listening to the pod, gigantic air quotes here, fix it, right? Why has coach education not solved that? Well, because that's not good enough. And if you think about something like MLB PitchSmart, right? Like that standard's been out for around a decade. And people have kind of chosen a couple different levels of PitchSmart compliance, right? You have organizations, and again, longtime listeners, I apologize for the horse glue, but let me just try to work this through. PitchMart's been out for about 10 years, and when they created the PitchMart standard, there were kind of levels of compliance people could choose. And it basically is, to kind of overly simplify things, there's PitchMart compliant, and that's mandatory compliant organizations like Little League, like Pony, and that's one level of things. And then you ended up kind of like the PitchSmart aware. And PitchSmart aware is different from mandatory compliance structurally in that you're not basically mandating behavior. It doesn't say that if you're going to be coaching kids and having them pitch that you are going to be constrained by these specific types of behaviors that correlate strictly rest and recovery. Right? Like that's the basic function of what PitchSmart did. And it's been, look, and I've seen people who will like make these little sideways comments about, pitching injuries have only gotten worse since PitchMart. Like, look, I fundamentally, in the core of my soul, disagree with any contention that suggests that PitchMart was like a net negative relative to what came before. That's not the issue. The issue is that PitchSmart was stood up, but who's compliant and who's PitchSmart aware? And even within that, of the organizations that are PitchSmart compliant, or even of the ones that are PitchSmart aware, is there any cross-organizational communication to inform what it looks like for a kid to pitch in one type of event on day one and pitch in another type of event in day three, right? Structurally, that's just not a thing that PitchSmart controls for. I realize I'm getting a little bit ahead of field, so let me back it off a little bit. Point being is that PitchSmart, I think, was good, but limited in its effectiveness because it doesn't function in the way that we want universal pitch counts to function, which is that they are universal, right? This is where the speed limit thing comes into, right? Like we just need something that's tantamount to the National Federation of Highway Safety or whatever, or is it NFHS? No, it's National Highway Traffic and Safety Association, NHTSA, some alphabet organization at the federal level that kind of goes like, look, this is the federally mandated speed limits on freeways. We need speed limits. And absent these speed limits, it's the behavior that we see and we have seen over the course of the last decades. The more that youth baseball has changed, the more that it has moved itself more and more towards select ball and club ball, which inherently puts winning in a much higher priority. And by doing that, we have allowed coaches to talk themselves into usage patterns of children that you would never do with an older adult player, that you'd never do with a collegiate player, that you never do with a professional player. We've done that thing. So consequently, kids get overused, right? Like it's a natural outcome of this type of system, which is a lack of system, right? This is my favorite quote that longtime listeners know is the old W. Edward Deming. Each system is perfectly designed to get the outcome that it gets. We don't have enough system in place to control for this type of stuff, so we're getting this type of outcome. And in the most unfortunate part about this is once again, we're in a period of time coming into the spring, games just started, and we're starting to see the effect of this lack of system. Somebody sent me this morning, a 9U team in Arkansas used 5 pitchers to play 5 games over a weekend. Pitch counts of 180, 144, 113, 70, and 16. So that's 3 9-year-olds throwing more than 100 pitches in a weekend. I don't know what to say. This is just not good. So again, when you start to think about a system that solves for this, it's not an education thing, because the odds are decently high that this coach is aware of PitchSmart, right? Like, I mean, it's mandatory in Little League. Little League is kind of ubiquitous. I have a hard time imagining that the men or women that are running this team are just kind of like tacitly unaware of PitchSmart, right? They don't have a system that constrains their behavior, so that's what we're trying to propose. So let's get into it, right? I'll run through a decent chunk of the presentation that I gave to MLB and USA Baseball, which again, huge shout out to John D'Angelo at Major League Baseball and his staff and the other folks that were responsible for pitching injury report, because I think that sets the table for us to be able to have this conversation. And it is not lost on me in any way, shape, or form how impactful it is to be able to have this conversation in the office of Major League Baseball, right? Like I've said this before, and I don't know, like maybe I'm getting into this phase of life where I just repeat myself. So I'll say it again. The fact that Major League Baseball issued the pitching injury report and it didn't end at page 31 is a hugely significant event. Those first 31 pages of the report, if anybody that hasn't read it, you can read some summaries that have been posted by Jeff Passan and other big national writers. The first 31 pages is opinion, anecdote, conjecture about what's happening at the major league level. Starting at page 32, we're starting to draw a direct correlation between what's happening at the elite level, but the long tail effect of the systemic issues that are evolved in youth and amateur baseball. They didn't have to do that. And the fact that they did, to me, is the most significant signal that they could possibly send that, like, we're aware, right? Like, we're aware. We understand what it is. It's not that these kids get drafted as 18 to 24-year-olds and they're just, like, absent any of the flaws of how our game functions at the youth and the amateur level. You're picking up scars. And in some cases, I mean literal scar tissue, because kids are getting TJ. They could have buried their head in the sand on this issue. They could have not drawn this correlation, but they did. And the fact that they did that, to me, is incredibly significant, because who swings a bigger stick, pun intended, about the way that we think about our game than Major League Baseball? Right? They're the most significant baseball organization in God's known universe. And they took the opportunity when it presented itself to tell the truth. So you can feel whatever type of way you might feel about Major League Baseball, but consider that this is just like Major League Baseball is, it's men and women that love this game just as much as we do, and they're running the system the best way that they can. And when faced with information that might suggest that there are improvements that could be made to that system, they didn't shy away from it. They told the truth. And that means something. So, because of the work of Rob Haney and Taylor McCullough at PG, and again, it's Perfect Game, right? Like we've talked. I mean, I know we've talked on this podcast about Perfect Game, because they're the behemoth in the room, right? The elephant in the room in terms of like the place that they have in youth baseball is PG, but Taylor's there participating in this conversation. Taylor is there with his PG hat on, advocating for what organizers need and like in some of the structure and systems that they need in order to keep their kids healthy. He's not shying away from the conversation either. He's not rejecting the truth. That means something. So, anyways, John, gets us all involved there. We get a chance to work up this presentation, and then, Rob and Taylor kind of set the stage for the first couple pages of it. And then because this specific subcommittee, this coalition that we started at the Youth Summit in Augusta that revolves around universal pitch counts and universal pitch count reporting, I'm the chair of said subcommittee. So, and this is also kind of my baby. I was talking to my wonderful, darling wife last week before I went to the trip. And I think it was actually like the night before I left, and just kind of had a realization that in so much as it matters, and again, this is not about me, but just because you guys are, it's our podcast family. You listen to us talk about this stuff every week. So I guess I'll just give you the full truth about how it sits for me personally. I'm rapidly approaching a place where I'm no longer satisfied doing a great amount of good for a small number of people. Because I'm aware that there's other stuff out there that we need to get fixed. So, for the, let's call it, I don't know. I mean, between educational stuff that we put out, like the Skills to Skill Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual that I happen to write. So I guess page shill, right? I gotta. For the educational stuff that we put out, for the products that we sell that I do believe are doing developmental good for kids, let's say that we have an area of effect of, let's call it 100,000 kids. And I'm probably being I'm probably overshooting that by a decent chunk. But let's just say it's 100,000 kids who are either coached by somebody that's like run a youth baseball development certification course, or they read the Skills at Scale book, or they've done like our free individual training plans or our free team training plans, which you can find at drivelinebaseball.com. Or they're on an academy team. They're doing Academy Flex as like a hybrid online in-person stuff. They're doing an Academy Snapshot to get some signal about like where they stand. Let's say that body of players is 100,000 people. Okay. Let's talk about the real population size, because MLB published a study, or not a study, but they published an article that said that there were 16.7 youth baseball participants in the United States in 2024. I believe it was 2024. Oh, geez, let me just heat check myself. Here it is. I've got it right here. This was published in March of 2024, so I guess these are 2023 numbers. My bad. Sorry for the heat check, but I want to make sure I had it right. So 16.7 million participants in 2023, and that participation number is actually up. And it's just like the broad number. That doesn't mean that we've solved the other issue that I talk about all the time, which is retention, but I digress. 16.7 million participants. Of that, it's 8.9 that are like casual players. So this is like they might do an MLB pitch hit and run event, but they're not playing in a little league team. They might do some types of like Parks and Rec youth baseball thing, but they're not playing on a team consistently. You end up with somewhere around, I think it's 7.6 million kids that are consistently playing. So if 7.6 million is like the total number of players that we could affect by installing this type of system for universal pitch count, universal reporting, and I'm doing some amount of good work, it's not me. Us, the team, me, Jeremy, our squad. Let's say we're doing $100,000 worth of positive, or 100,000 people's worth of positive effect. That's a pretty small slice of that 7.6, like honestly. And I guess for where I am, I'm aware that there's a capacity to do more good, and I certainly want to do as much of that good as I can, specifically through this lens of academy, right? Like if we had 500 kids sign up for Academy Flex in the next 12 months, that'd be great. And that would be, again, do a significant amount of good for those kids. If we had 1,000 kids sign up for a snapshot, right, and we were able to give 1,000 youth athletes a very clear path between where they are right now at their age and where they need to get to if they want to continue to play this game when they're 14 years old. And by doing so, we are implicitly giving them leverage to make sure that like they are set up with the skills that they need to be able to be competitive at that stage. If we did that for another 1,000 people, that'd be great. Make my heart really, really full. But again, 7.6 million kids. I want to do more good. So that's how we approach this thing. So coming back to the presentation, I started off with my new favorite quote, which is an old Archimedes of Syracuse quote. Give me a lever long enough on a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. And the intention there is just like, let's set the stage a little bit, right? I know that if I'm in a meeting with MLB baseball and USA baseball, there's probably a reason why they haven't tried to move in this direction previously, right? Like I am aware that because of, again, the structure and system, we don't have a national ministry of sport. We don't have a national federation of sport. We don't have congressionally granted authority on our national governing bodies of any sport in this country for them to be able to define and control core behavior in their space. So the NGBs, and this means all of them, USA Baseball, USA Hockey, USA Wrestling, USA Track and Field, USA Tennis, USA Soccer, all of them have to come up with ways in their domain to basically enforce compliance. And because of the fractured nature of the youth baseball space, it's reasonable to understand why this hasn't been undertaken before. But to come back to the Archimedes quote, right? I shall move the world. Just because this thing is going to be difficult and it might feel tantamount to moving the world, that doesn't mean that it's not worth doing. And to come back to the leverage thing, right? Give me a lever and a fulcrum. Who's got more leverage in our space than MLB and USA Baseball? No one. No one. They are the national governing body. MLB is Major League flipping baseball. So that's all the leverage. And my appeal to kind of set the stage that way, like, and again, I'm a quote guy. I know it's a little like nerdy to do this, but it means something to call on someone that existed, 500 years ago or whatever. I'll have to look up the dates. Don't check me on that. But like to say that like men and women have considered this thing before. We have considered how difficult it might be to do something substantial, but we realize that we're not going to be intimidated by the difficulty. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. That's what we're talking about. So yes, the fractal nature of youth baseball and amateur baseball in our country makes thinking about this type of stuff, installing a universal pitch count system, feels scary, and it feels ponderous, and it feels like, how the hell are we even going to do this? But I reject that. It is possible to create these systems to compel this behavior, to incentivize compliance. It is absolutely possible, and that's what we're pushing for. So, quick review why injuries happen. Again, I won't turn this into horse glue on our stage because we've covered this before, but the general understanding that we have as best we can about why injuries happen. Hey, you want to know your kid's getting hurt? It's real simple. Throwing and pitching with fatigue. The more that you throw and pitch with fatigue, two things happen. You have kinetic and kinematic changes to their mechanics. These things definitively happen as they continue to throw while fatigue happens. When that happens, you see these kinetic and kinematic changes, things, you see decreases to performance, and inevitably you are opening up the door for injury. So you want to know why we get freaked out about a 9-year-old throwing 180 pitches on the week? Because I know what that 180 pitches did to that kid in a physiological perspective. Unless that child was throwing 180 pitch bullpens on a recurring basis, and I doubt that that was happening, that athlete experienced an increased amount of fatigue, which decreased the efficiency and effectiveness in their mechanics, which increased injury risk. That's why kids get hurt. That loop. So you want to solve for that stuff, we need systems of control for overuse. So why don't we do that? So basically we review, hey, look, the current thing we're dealing with is a lack of systems, right? And again, PitchSmart has been tremendously effective and beneficial in the landscape of youth baseball compared to what came before it. However, PitchSmart is inherently limited in the fact that there's a small number of PitchSmart compliant organizations where the stuff is mandatory. There's a large number of PitchSmart aware organizations where the only thing that they need to do to be compliant at that level is go, hey, coach, here's some numbers. You should follow them. And that coach goes, okay, cool. If I don't win enough games, I don't retain enough of these players to come back and have a team next year, the parents will leave, so I am disincentivized to follow something that makes sense from a health standpoint. There's no incentive to do that because every year, new crop of kids. Even if I burned through 2 or 3 of these pitchers, are those parents getting any opportunity to send signal to new parents that are evaluating this organization like, hey, that coach hurt my kid? No, because this information isn't available transparently. It's not that MLB PitchSmart is bad, it's that it's limited and because of just the way that it was set up. And again, the landscape was different 10 years ago. The landscape has changed. We need to update the system. And again, you enter into this door of like right hand, left hand, because what I presented is like kid pitches in a Little League game on Friday, they throw 50 pitches, right? MLB PitchSmart defines that kid needs to rest for 2 whole days. Tournament baseball on the weekend. That organization is PitchSmart aware. So they're telling coaches about a PitchSmart standard, presumably. Maybe not. I register for those tournaments. We're not getting a lot of community. Like, let's call a spade, right? You're not often seeing calories being burned on the tournament organizer's side to repeatedly and repetitively tell coaches that like PitchSmart is the thing you should be aware of, right? That's at least in my experience. Could be wrong and different in other places. That's not a conversation that's happening frequently. So kid pitches on the weekend. Let's say that they're in an organization or a tournament org where it's innings, not pitches, right? So you can go, let's say 55 pitches on a Saturday, another 40, 50 pitches on a Sunday, and then that kid has another game in Little League. Let's say that game is on a Monday, right? They had a game Friday, they had a game Monday. That Little League coach has no idea that kid played on the weekend. You could even make the argument that if the parents don't know that this stuff is important, the parents are disincentivized from communicating that stuff to the kid because they're like, hey, Tommy, Katie, I want to see him get more reps, right? I want to see him get more reps, which is a totally normal thing that parents want to advocate for, and they would advocate for because they don't understand the need for workload management. They're parents. Their job is not this, right? They don't. That parent's job is to feed that kid and love that kid and get that kid to baseball practice. That parent's job is not to spend 1 hour a week doing some sort of professional development in their capacity as a youth baseball parent to understand the ecosystem. That's not a thing that happens. And if they're just like, oh, hey, Johnny, Katie, they pitch on the weekend. It kind of went okay, but I want to see them get more reps because they go oh, the more that you do something, the better that you'll get at it, right? And they're not necessarily wrong. So they're disincentivized to tell that Little League coach about what happened on the weekend because they just want to see their kid get more opportunities. Now you're entering a workload where because of the lack of system, the lack of cross-organizational communication, you are afforded the opportunity for the right hand to not talk to the left hand. Now these things are in conflict. And now we've opened up a door where chronic overusage, which leads to things like Little League elbow, Little League shoulder, which then leads to more substantial injuries in terms of growth plates, UCL stuff, etc. We've systemically opened up the door for that type of stuff to happen. So what do we solve it with? Universal pitch counts and universal reporting. What does that mean? Universal pitch counts, what we're proposing is basically leveraging the Pulse data set that we have here at Driveline and certainly hopefully being able to expand that data set. But starting with what we have right now, because the Pulse sensor gets us kinetic data at the joint level on a per throw basis, we can start to model out broadly what is the workload cost of all 9-year-olds on a per throw basis. What's the average? Because you're going to have some 9s that are genetically regressive. You're going to have some 9s that are genetically advanced. You're going to have the average kids. But if you average out all of those kids over a decent enough sample size, what's the workload cost of one throw? Right. Because if we have that number, and we also understand that the issue when it comes to workload management has to do with a relationship between acute and chronic stress. That when that number gets above 1.3, youth side, it might be 1.5. Again, we're working this out on the R&D side, but let's say that it's just 1.3. When that acute to chronic workload ratio gets above a 1.3, now we know that there's a significant increase in injury risk. Well, how do we solve that? Well, we solve that by controlling the workload so that the acute doesn't spike, and it doesn't spike that ratio. How do we do that? We control for overuse over time. So that's what we're trying to do, right? We want to create a system that's informed not by a well-intentioned dart throw at a wall about what's the right number, but instead, let's leverage the science and the data that we have to actually calculate this stuff over a broad player population. But then at the end of the day, we're still communicating something that's patterned off of what PitchSmart has already kind of done, which is a direct correlation between pitch counts and rest, right? We've already trained coaches to kind of understand that relationship. A lot of coaches, because it was mandatory compliance in Little League and Pony and Babe Ruth. It's mandatory. So you have a generation of coaches who now understand if I pitch a kid X number of pitches, they should have Y amount of rest. That's a good thing. We want to keep that relationship because, again, that is how we're going to be able to control for not having a spike to the acute to chronic workload. However, we just want that number to be informed by data and science, not by me just going, this feels right. And think about it. One of the things that is allowed in PitchSmart is if you pitch less than 20 pitches, you can come back next day, 0 rest. Right? That's a thing that's allowed with PitchSmart. We know 2 things are happening. Number one, in tournament baseball, you have coaches who are who are trying to follow PitchSmart, but they're gaming that system. So they're going to run like 6 pitchers in a game, all of them throwing 20 on a Saturday, and then they'll pitch them again on a Sunday. The issue isn't necessarily what transpires over the course of that single weekend's workload. The issue ends up being what happens if you do that weekend after weekend after weekend after weekend after weekend. Again, let's think about what we understand from the data. Kids don't produce a ton of force on a per throw basis when you're looking at the biomechanics, right? That's true in our pulse data set, that's true in our markerless motion capture lab, and that's true in our marker-based lab. Kids don't produce a ton of force on a per throw basis. However, we also understand that there's a crap ton of kids out there getting injured through repetitive stress. So what's the signal that's being sent there? The signal that's being sent is that the chronic workload is the thing that we need to be concerned with. So it could be that when you look at the data on a singular acute weekend basis, right? The 20 pitches on Saturday and the 60 on Sunday might not necessarily be the issue, but it's when you do that over and over and over and over and over again, that's where the problem comes. So what we're proposing is to leverage the data that basically looks at this per throw workload data that we have and develop a pitch count standard that, again, communicates on a line that's similar to PitchSmart, strict correlation between pitch volume and rest, but structured in a way that it controls for keeping that acute to chronic workload ratio out of that danger zone. So that's what we're talking about in terms of universal pitch counts at a very detailed level. What are we talking about for universal reporting? What we're talking about is basically doing an advanced and more wide-ranging version of what Baseball Ontario, of all people, have already done. They developed an app, and that app basically puts all their information into one place so that when you look at the app, you can see transparently who's ready to go and who needs more rest, right? The PitchSmart standard is, the PitchSmart standard might not necessarily be completely imperfect, and I guess we'll dig into that when we start to do this analysis on the workload, start running some simulations, you average out all these values, etc. It could be the PitchSmart standard isn't the problem, but the problem is, how do we even know that anyone's compliant, right? I coached Little League for more than a decade. I think the only time that I had somebody ask me about my pitch counts was when I was coaching All-Stars. It's not that the stuff isn't being tracked, because at least what we had to do is, right, we told all of our coaches, hey, that like it's Little League, right? It's mandatory compliance, so you have to track. So we have to be able to track it in Game Changer. But did I get any visibility? Was there any visibility given for like what those numbers were? No, not unless somebody's taking the time to burn the calories to look. And how many Little League volunteers during season are doing like weekly audits on all of their coaches? And I'll ask you one other question. How much insight do parents have into coaches' behavior around player usage and workloads? This much. Literally this much. 0. There's no transparently available insight into what these numbers are. And if that's true in Little League, and if that's true in Pony, and that's true in a pitched out mandatory compliant environment, what do you think it looks like on the travel side? What do you think it looks like on the select side, where they're running different tournaments where they just do innings and not pitch counts, where they're a tournament organizer that's PitchSmart aware? Hey, coach, I made you aware that this is a rule that's available. I didn't enforce that you had to follow it. I didn't check that you were compliant with it. I just said, here's something to think about. Your incentivization as the coach is to go win a ball game. And I guarantee you that 9U coach who ran a kid for $180 on the weekend, he or she is telling you all about their incentives by their behavior. It's clear as day, right? So what we're proposing in terms of universal reporting is basically an app-based solution, right? Where you have cross-organizational data, rec providers, tournament providers, showcase companies even, pulling into one place. If each kid has a centralized tracking ID number, right, which again is a thing that other NGBs do, Let me see if I can actually pull. Oh, I actually have. I have the number. You want to know what national governing bodies of sport in our country actually track unique player IDs? USA Hockey, USA Tennis, USA Swimming, USA Wrestling, USA Volleyball, USA Gymnastics, USA Track and Field. Each player is tracked in their system. Once you have that system, okay, now we have and look, and I don't know this part of it. I don't know what the function looks like. I don't know if we have the home team and the away team kind of going like player ID number X had pitch count Y. Maybe that's the way that it gets done. Game Changer is fairly ubiquitous in our sport at this point. Maybe it's just an API push-pull from Game Changer into USA Baseball with the centralized tracking ID number. The point is that this is a software problem that, number one, we don't have to go from zero on. Because again, all of those other NGBs, they're already doing player tracking. They already stood up a system. Now, they didn't stood up a system with an API push-pull, although I kind of wonder if that's going on the USA Wrestling side. If you run USA Wrestling tournaments or you run a USA Wrestling club and you are pushing kids' event records into a system, holler at your boy and tell me how that's working. Deven at drivelinebaseball.com, 2 E's. Anyways, the point being that once this is an app-based software solution, now you can afford yourself the opportunity to push out two incredibly important things. One is a player available or unavailable to pitch based on the mandated amount of rest that they had relative to prior usage. Red light, green light. Number two, if they're not available, when can they come back? Again, and you can have that stuff functioning based on what they did in Little League, what they did in the tournament, what they did in a showcase, because it all goes into the same place. Universal reporting. Right? If I could do like the NBC, the more you know, the big star rainbow thing or whatever, I would do that. And if you have all that information flowing into a centralized place, now you afford yourself the opportunity to do some reporting, right? Who's compliant with this? Who isn't? What orgs? What tournament providers? What showcase companies? What teams? What coaches? And it's transparent. Coaches can see it. Kids can see it. Parents can see it. Because it's all visibility. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. So that's what we're reporting that's what we're talking about in terms of universal reporting. It's basically an app-based solution. And I think the tricky thing to kind of confront here, and to be honest about the fact is we're going to have to compel parents to understand that participating in this system has additional value, right? We're working on a kind of thinking through what it looks like to propose a set of benefits for leagues, for organizational providers, for showcase companies. What does it look like to create a system of benefits that compels them to want to participate in this system? I will tell you that if you look at all the other NGBs, a lot of the ways that they do that, I think one of the primary ways that they do that is through reduced rate access to business and operations insurance. So, okay, great. Again, who's got the leverage to create that system? Can I go to Lloyd's of London and be like, hey, my name's Deven. I work at this place called Driveline. You probably haven't heard of us. We train thousands of pros and Cy Young's, MVP awards winners. Anyways, I have a very specific idea of what youth baseball needs. Can you create me an insurance program? Is that a conversation that I can have? Probably not. Who's got the leverage to have that conversation? The answer's right there. But I think you still have to compel parents to understand that this is something that they should be searching for. Well, great. What's the best news about that? The reason that we're trying to compel parents to kind of behave this way is because of the singular thing that brings all parents together, which is that we desire for our children to be safe. It's a biological imperative. We're not talking about, are you a Honda guy or a Toyota guy? Are you a Ford guy or a Chevy guy? What's in your heart? What are you scared about? What frightens you? I'm going to come back to that in a second, this whole what frightens us thing, because I got to wrap on something that. But the point is, that's how you market this thing. What did the NFL do when they were confronted with the issue of CTE? They pivoted 7-on-7 in flag, and they introduced those goofy looking helmets. And Who gives a crap how goofy the helmet looks if it keeps a kid's brain more likely to be safe, right? They're communicating to parents that, hey, I get your point. You're worried about the injury impact of this whole thing. Well, guess what? You know that there's a way that you can still do this thing and learn how to play football but mitigate some of that injury risk? 7-on-7 and flag. And they see tremendous growth at that level, to the point that high schools are now feeling compelled that they have to run girls' flag football teams. Can you imagine that being a thing 20 years ago? Can you imagine that being a thing 10 years ago? The NFL was confronted with an issue that related to safety, and they saw the long tail effect of what was going on in their game because of this lack of system and structure. And they were able to pivot their game and modify it to the point that it controlled for more of these bad outcomes. And by doing so, they have drastically increased their player population. If you don't think, and if you do not think that there is a long-term economic proposition by doing that, hey man, you're missing the forest for the trees. If there are 7.6 million kids in this country that are playing baseball on a recurring basis, and 1% of those kids are getting injured on an annual basis, and they stop being fans of the game of baseball because of that, that is a net economic loss for Major League Baseball. Because, your boy did a little bit of research, if you're a fan of the game from the ages of 18 to 80 or 18 to 70, I can't remember what the number is, your lifetime economic value to Major League Baseball, and again, this is my research, MLB might have better numbers. I actually would assume they have better numbers. But what I found is it's somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000. Okay. So 1% of 7.6 million kids multiplied between $10,000 to $15,000, you've created somewhere additional on a per year basis between $156 and $234 million of additional lifetime economic value by having those kids not get burnt out because youth baseball hurt them. There are positive economic effects of keeping kids safe in our game, and I don't think we should be ignorant of that. I think we should embrace that idea. The other thing here is that, again, we are just inherently going to need USA Baseball and Major League Baseball and some combination therein to act in a sanctioning capacity in this way, right? We're just going to have to step into this world because, again, I can't go to Taylor at PG, and Taylor has been a willing and wonderful participant in this conversation and say, hey, Taylor, you know me, Deven at Driveline. I want you guys to be compliant with this standard that I created. What? I don't have the economic resources to compel them on the financial side to want to participate. I can't create a reduced rate insurance. I don't have MLB's marketing lever to go hey, you guys can weaponize this for your good by advertising yourself as a pitch count 2.0 compliant org. I don't have the leverage, but I know who does. So that's what we're working on. It's going to take some time, right? It's going to take some time, and I think the important thing to kind of acknowledge is, again, because of the work of Rob Haney and Taylor McCullough and certainly myself, we have a coalition of interest right now. We've had conversations with Little League. We've had conversations with UTRIP. We've had conversations with PBR and Bullpen. We've had conversation with PG because that's Taylor's representing entity, right? We have conversation with Babe Ruth, with all these regional participants and smaller mid-tier tournament and showcase providers. We're having these conversations with a lot of people who are all you know what? Yeah, I think this is a conversation we need to have. We don't yet have a defined thing that we need them to kind of go hey, I know that you said you wanted to have this conversation, but this is actually the thing that you're signing up for. Are you willing to do that? Right? We need to turn a coalition of interest into a coalition of action. By doing that, we have to kind of define what that action actually means. Bunch of issues we're still going to have to solve, right? My idea here is, and I've tried to make this as fully formed as possible because, anxiety compels me to try to approach it that way. There's some stuff that we still haven't defined, right? We know that we want to target the customers of a tournament organizer, a lead, and a showcase's customers. We have to market this thing to parents. We have to want them to choose this, right? And that means, hey, Hall of Famer CC Sabathia doing a commercial going hey, when I have my kids playing in tournament baseball, I'm choosing events that are compliant this way because it matters. It may mean we have to red letter the crap of organizations that don't choose to be compliant this way. And I don't know. I guess we'll see what that looks like. But, you're going to have to kind of define and market the incentives of participation here. You're going to have to define what it actually means. What are the benefits for a league, for an organizer, for a showcase company in order to choose compliance with this standard? The insurance thing is pretty compelling right now. Now, where you're kind of like helping somebody's bottom line by choosing to be compliant this way, that's absolutely worth exploring. You're gonna have to define what the consequences of violations are, right? Like, thinking about this, knowing what I know about youth baseball, coaches are gonna try to game the system. That for sure is going to happen, right? So now, what does it look like? Do we have some amount of reconciliation between the home team and the away team, and how does it work to resolve that process? Because you need to have an answer, because the immediate outcome of that game, once those numbers put up there, should be clear information for all parties involved about when a kid who pitched in that game gets to pitch next. How do we control for the chronic overusage based on the strict correlation between rest and pitch counts? So guys and girls are going to try to game that system. We're going to have to figure out how we work around that stuff, right? And my perspective is that, like, I do think that you need to penalize the coaches, not the players. Working that through with the event providers who, again, are trying to get through X amount of games over a compressed amount of period of time on the weekend is going to be challenging. But again, this is a doable thing. To figure out, the app discrepancies, there's some stuff to solve for there. But if you think about what it looks like to stand this system up, and I'll kind of end this conversation here because there's one more thing I need to catch on, or I need to hit on before I go to my next meeting. Anybody familiar with Martindale-Hubbell, an attorney rating review service? Okay, well, imagine a world where we have this app now, and it's cross-organizational, right? It's for all this workload stuff. What if we had all the coaches register? And what if, with all the coaches registering, we now have an opportunity to have a singular source of truth about the amount of violations of pitch count rules that coach has exhibited over the course of their career? What does it look like to have information about the certifications that coaches have all gone through? Have you done the base USA baseball stuff? The abuse prevention stuff, the concussion awareness stuff, the lightning policy, don't stand there. Have they gone through, again, USA Baseball has a crap ton of certification courses. You would get public, transparently, widespread availability about who's participating in that stuff, who isn't. So now, as a parent, hey, my kid gets an invite to Joe Blow's elite. I don't know, man. I've done this so many times. I kind of like running out of whatever. The Triceratops tournament championship team. usabaseball.com/compliance or whatever. I get an app and I can see, those coaches have gone through Safe Sport. And they did all the USA safety certs too. And they've got a pretty damn good record about controlling for overuse. Okay, cool. Now I can evaluate that organization from information that, because I have transparent access to it, I understand how those coaches' behavior. I understand how they behave. I understand the things that they value because I have access to this stuff. You tell me how you get publicly available information about who has and who hasn't gone through Safe Sport at this point. What parent in the last 12 months has gone to MLB Safe Sport or whatever the site is and looked up an org that they're evaluating for their child? I'd be shocked if that number is greater than 5. And I'm aware of the scale we're talking about, right? The information isn't available transparently. You end up in this issue. So consider what it looks like to have an app-based solution that is sometime in the future, because you've agreed upon this system and structure, that now you can elevate the function of that system. One other thing here, and then I gotta get to the last thing. And I'm not punting this just because it's possible that I'm going to cry talking about this last thing, but maybe I am. I don't know. You also have an opportunity to double down on the market pressure of parents choosing compliant organizations, leagues, tournament providers, etc., because of the NCAA rules. Because what if Major League Baseball said, we are not going to send scouts to events, to leagues, to games, etc., that aren't compliant with this new standard? And you're also telling me that NCAA Division I coaches can't talk to kids until August going into their junior year. Now, from the junior year forward, those type of events that are compliant under this system are incredibly valuable and compelling for parents to choose them. You're doubling the market pressure, and you're also sending a signal that like the Xavier Nyans, the Mason Pikes of the world, they're choosing those events. And how compelling is it to see those top of the food chain kids choosing that? Because they're not going to go play an event that a scout isn't going to be there, because that's the type of leverage that player needs. Now you have the 1% of the population sending a signal to the other 99% of the population about the behavior and the choice that is valuable. So that's my presentation. Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to like run through it another time. But this is probably the 15th, 20th time that I've run it in the last 5 days. So I got one more thing. Man, I don't even know how to get into this one. I went to the memorial service, I guess. The memorial service for the parent of one of our kids here in Washington yesterday. If you had told me 5 years ago that was going to be like a part of this job, I would not have believed you. And it happened. And we talk about Driveline family a lot. Like, you go on our socials, Driveline Youth, follow us, please. And we're on TikTok now. I finally capitulated. We're doing stuff on TikTok, so you can find us over there too. We talk about Driveline family a lot. And again, like the Warriors tee that I have on, right? Like we did like these videos, and it has my talking head, me talking over them, doing voiceover. And, I'm aware that having people choose this thing is a very specific choice. I guess it's an outlier choice. It's a little bit different because we just value things very differently than most other travel and select teams. Our behavior, the way that we spend time, is very different than a lot of other travel and select teams. And it's not like a keeping up with the Joneses choice. It's a different choice. So we've always talked about Driveline family as like, I think that's kind of the implicit thing that's being understood there. So like we are united by this choice that's just very different. So we're at the memorial yesterday, and family, there's some wonderful stuff there, and it's I don't know, it's always such an intimate thing to see people's emotions laid really bare in that setting. Because in that setting, man, it's like you I don't know, you're gonna tell the truth. When my grandfather passed away, my mom and my grandma and my uncles gave me an opportunity to speak for all of the grandparents, because I was the oldest. I am the oldest grandchild. And my grandfather was very involved in raising me and my grandparents. I was very, very fortunate to have that. And when I got up there to talk about my grandpa, I had to tell the truth, man. I had to tell the truth because, like, what's the alternative? That I'm going to sit up there and not talk about how angry I was. I'm pretty sure that the thing that I said, and I don't know that I have the stones to like actually go and dig up what I wrote, because it still hurts. But the thing that I said at the time was like, was so angry that I didn't get more time. And I was so angry that I couldn't extend my grandfather's life long enough to see me grow up. I wanted to pull the world apart with my bare hands. I had to tell the truth, man. Like that's where I was, and I was supremely appreciative of the opportunity that I had to be raised by him and to love him and to be loved by him. So for my players, for this kid's mother's memorial service yesterday, they do some wonderful thoughts and experiences were shared. Look, man, I knew this woman through baseball. Like I didn't know her that well, but you sit in those rooms and it's just like, I don't know, man, each one of our lives, it's like they're so small and they're so fleeting, but the reverberations of the impact that we make on each other are just exceptionally massive. So we had these talks, and then they do like the slideshow thing, and it's like you're trying to see somebody one more time, right? And I'm sitting there watching this slideshow, and her son was there along with a couple of his teammates, so, and a kid that used to be on our org. So like in total, there's like 5 kids there that I know. 4 of them that are still with us. One that went on to another team, and I knew it was coming, man. I just had a feeling in my gut. And the first slide comes up, and I see him wearing an Academy hat and a Driveline sweatshirt. And then another slide comes up, and he's there with his mom, right? And then another slide comes up of him, with his mom and his siblings, and he's wearing his Academy jersey and his Academy hat. And there's another one where he's wearing our stuff. And I don't know, it just, I don't think enough people think about how embedded into the lives of these families that we end up being because of the nature of what we choose to do. When you combine kids that love baseball at a very, very deep level with a program like ours where we focus on the skill development and we take in kids maybe of differing abilities because we believe in our capacity to develop them, and we do that. And the amount of time commitment that we put in, it's a lot, it's a lot. And I don't know. It struck me. It struck me how fortunate I am, and we are, to be able to have our families embedded with us and us embedded with them to the degree that we are. And this player, it's kind of a funny story. He came in for tryouts a few years ago, and he had been overused pretty significantly by the previous org that he was playing for, because he was a good young kid, good ball player, and he could pitch, right? We all know, strike throwers at the youth level are it's a lot of leverage. So he got overused, and we figured out the extent to which he got overused with that previous org because he broke his arm during our tryout. He literally had a fracture pop up. He heard something hurt, and he stopped, and we were just like, okay, we'll shut it down, right? So that happens during the tryout. Well, it's like, well, what are you going to do? Well, what we're going to do is we're not going to turn our back on this kid, because now he just broke his arm with us, and I understand how this thing looks. Where like, if we don't give him a roster spot, what's he going to do? Right? Is he done with baseball for the next year? Where's he going to rehab? Is he just going to do that on his own? So it's like, no, we have to take him. He has to be with us, because I'm not going to turn my back on a kid that way, because I don't know what that would mean. I don't know what that would portend for the rest of his baseball experience. I told him yesterday, man, I was like, I'm so glad that you broke your arm during the tryout. Because I had the opportunity then to get to know that young man, to get to know his family and get to know his mother that's no longer with us. So I say all that to say that I think the Driveline family thing took on a real new meaning for me yesterday. And it is a privilege. You know, it's a privilege to it's a privilege to be embedded in people's families and to some degree or another help teach young men and women through this particular vehicle and this lens. And I don't know that it's ever been more crystal clear just how much of a privilege it is before yesterday. So to Jenny, I'm very happy that you brought your son down to play with us, and in so much as I have the capacity to do so, I will. My line is always open to that young man, and he's going to be with us for as long as he wants to play baseball, and he's never going to have to worry about trying out. I'm going to support that kid for as long as I'm here. So anyways, sorry to end this on a downer note. I don't know. That's all I got. I just had to get that one off my chest. So thank you guys for giving me the platform. Axbat.com, code DL20, get you 20% off at Axbat. DriveLineBaseball.com, Youth Power Bats, Youth Underload Smash Bats, Skills to Scale book. And again, the new apparel, the Warriors tee, the Let It Rip tee, and the Shark Smell Blood, whichever one of those things resonates for you, you can come check them out. I don't know what we're going to do next time. I don't know if we're going to do this old fireside chat again. It might be Jeremy and I guess we'll see. Thank you guys for being here. He is Jeremy, even if he's not actually here. I am Deven. We are Down by Law. Catch you next time. Thanks. Bye.